Um, hi everyone. So very welcome to my live streaming where we read for every day, at least for 91 days, because it's a challenge that we are going to read a book every day on live streaming for 2 hours, and it's 11th day that I've been performing, and with that I'm having so much cold. I don't know why it happened within 1 hour. Like earlier I was fine, but as you know that I'm having allergy for like cold. Actually, if I felt cold, if I sense cold or anything, like even if my fan is turned on, at that time like I feel very much like coldy. I don't know what exactly do I need to say for these. I don't know. As yesterday I told that like I don't need to say negative words, so I'll try not to say that. So we are going to read a book that is Mindsight that we have been doing as usual every day. It's 11th day, and yeah, it's a fantastic day. If you are watching me, then thank you for watching me. And let me see how many viewers I'm having. So we don't have any viewers. Gone viewers. So it's okay, no problem. If you are seeing it after our live streaming, then also it's fine. Whenever you want to see it, that will be awesome. Uh, Try to find things for yourself, that what works for you, what didn't work for you, but never believe on your first instinct. Let's say if you are working on something and that you didn't like, that doesn't mean that you didn't like, because first time most of the things we don't like. So don't believe on your first instinct. First, I can't say first instinct, but sometimes what happens whenever you are doing the things at that time, what happens at first you don't like, but you if you try doing same thing, even if it's food, even if it's a skill, even if it's anything, if you try it a second time, third time, fourth time, then you realize that oh yeah, actually you like it. So that is how it works. So I would suggest that try giving it some, like at least 4 5 times, and see if it works for you or not, because never go for, like let's say if you are working on editing skills and you're not getting that in the first, then don't believe that first thing. Try it for a while, and after some time you'll get to know that oh really if it will work or not. And so that is how it work. Average view duration, I don't know who has joined, but it's showing that average view duration is 3. But yeah, that's the thing, that is main thing. Like as you know, if you're like a subscriber, and if you seen my channel homepage, then you'll get to know how I'm performing editing skill challenge as well. So yesterday I did some of the editing, but exactly I didn't show you what editing I did. But one thing that I told that was related to like what you want to show your audience, that I have to learn. So as to that learn, besides that, this is our like editing skill that we really like to work on. So let's go ahead and read. As we know that when we read, in between we get some thoughts and we can discuss about that. Or first, like we are discussing about, sometimes we discuss about the things which I feel. But if you feel something, or if you want to have something from me, you can let me know in the comments or chat, wherever you prefer to comment or chat. Just do it so that we can make it very useful for you, for me, for everybody, and let's grow together. That is how the thing will work. So thank you very much if you are watching this live streaming, even after ending this live streaming. But it's worth like reading every day. So I'm performing that, I'm giving every day to my reading challenge, and it's very awesome. So let me start reading now. So here, like we are almost about to end this Mindsight book, It's say 72%, and might be it will be done tomorrow or today. I'm very much having cold. Why I did flip the iPad? Because it was having some spin in it, so I just wanted to remove it, spin or spiral, something, whatever we prefer to call. Again, okay, there is one thing that I really don't want to say negatively, but now after these live streaming, I'll figure out how can I make its voice coming. Okay,
Parents.
I will write it down ahead right now. So here I can take that. Take voice is not coming. That is the note I have taken because I was getting forward, and it's not good again and again. It's very difficult sometimes when you have cold and you are trying to speak or trying to perform something. Sometimes it's very that not I can say dangerous, but repetitive. Like it is getting coming again and again, like without any gap or without any pause. It's coming very frequently. But anyway, it's okay. We are performing our things, so it's fine. So let's start now. Dina's story was very different. Her parents had been in good health and there were no particular issues that she could recall. In fact, she said that she didn't remember many details about her childhood except that it was average, what a normal childhood is like. You may recall that this kind of vague summarizing and a glossing over specific details is characteristics of dismissing narratives. When I asked her more directly about her relationship with her parents, what would I can bring my MacBook Pro's cursor here, like good health, where I was reading actually. Here, it didn't remember many details about her childhood except that it was average. Now, what a normal childhood is like, you may recall that is this kind of vague summarizing and glossing over specific details is characteristics of dismissing narratives. When I asked her more directly about her relationship with her parents, what would happen when she upset or when she was separated from them, Denise responded, "My mother took good care of me. She was neat and excellent to cook. There were no particular things, I mean, nothing that would get me upset. My father was the same way. He was an engineer. My mother worked. My mother worked as a secretary, and we had a very organized home. Not it had to be that way. We choose it. Notice that the question is about relationships, but denies the responses focus on the individuals involved, a common pattern for someone with a history of avoidance and the adult dismissing stance. Then we came to the attachment interview question about loss. Yes, Denise replied. There was a loss when I was a child. My brother developed leukemia when I was 7 years old. He was only two. And I don't remember much except that we didn't talk about it after he died. My parents just went on. It didn't seem to change that much. I think now there were just three of us again. Denise told me in rather neutral way that she sometimes wondered why no one ever talked about her brother's death. I made a few more attempts to explore the family's emotional response to this loss, but Denise continued to deflect the conversation. Despite her relationships don't matter stance, I hoped that Dinah's fundamental need for connection was intact. And I believed that she could become more aware of this need if we approached it cautiously. As I have mentioned, research has revealed that people with dismissing narratives show physiological signs that their subcortical, limbic, and brainstem areas still register the importance of relationships. It's simply that the higher cortical areas where consciousness is created nurtured out this awareness in order to survive barren times. The key would be to align myself with these deeper subterranean circuits and a bolster Denise's ability to integrate them into her life. At the end of Denise's interview, I came back to her brother and said that perhaps following her feelings hadn't been safe in a family where everything was so organized and neat and where people didn't let themselves respond to the death of a child. She just looked at me with wide open eyes. This was very different from the confident gaze she would won. Uh, she had on when she first strode into my office, but no words came. Not it. She just looked at me, and my mind noted that something had shifted inside her. Something that had to be respected, not inspected, and not addressed overtly. At this vulnerable stage of her internal unfolding, both Denise and Peter had done the best they could to survive difficult childhoods, and their adaptations had left each with a gap in their development that the other person magically filled when they first met. Now, we all long, consciously or not, for what we did not receive in the past and what we don't have now. Denise could have used some of Peter's access to his feelings and his ability to be spontaneous and connected to his internal world. Peter could have used some of Denise's capacity to distance herself, her emotions and needs to stand back a bit from troubling experiences. But instead of collaborating and learning from each other, they retreated to their respective extremes, as so often happens with couples in distress. Now they were stuck at these distant poles. Picture how Denise's mind had sculpted her brain so that she could survive growing up in an emotional desert in response to an avoidant attachment to both parents. The most likely explanation for her dismissing the radio. She had shut down the circuitry of her brain that needed closeness and connections. The relational, emotional, and somatic focused right hemisphere. This is how she had become a boss without a hurt. She was disconnected from her own internal world of feelings and bodily sensations. Like Stewart, she seemed to have sought refuge in the logical, linear, linguistic, literal left mode of living. And like Anne, who had cut herself off from the neck down, Denise also seemed quite disconnected from her subcortical world. Even in her work as an architect, she had gravitated to office and industrial design rather than to homes or gathering places such as libraries, schools, or museums. The question now was whether Denise wanted to keep up the emotionally disconnected way of being. I thought I could help her by starting from the safe distance of science and by appealing to her highly visual architect's mind. Using a detailed, larger than a live plastic model of the brain, I showed her the hemisphere, pointing out how the corpus callosum linked the two halves and explaining how these connections may have been shut down. I also lent her a book for parents in which I had described this brain adaptation. Once these synaptic realities became clear in her awareness, I also reminded her that the brain is open to change across the lifespan because it responds to the focus of attention and to experiences we create intentionally. Now, there was great hope that those unrealized neural connections could still be stimulated to develop. I phrased this idea as an invitation from me and as an opportunity to grow, not as something she had to do to meet Peter's demand. This was a crucial point. Some people's attachment histories make them conform too readily to others' expectations, while others shut off any input from people close to them. These conditions can distort our motivation to change. Invitation, collaboration works better than issuing an ultimatum. Change or else. Denise could elect to stay the same. I said it was ultimately her choice. I asked her to think about it during the following week before committing to a certain path. Peter, for his part, needed to know how the wash of feelings that flooded him at times related to his early relationship experiences. Being ignored in any way, not being seen, was a powerful trigger for him. Sometimes he would jump suddenly from negotiating with the children to yelling at them. If Denise cut short discussion when they had it was ultimately her choice, and I asked her to think about it during the following week before committing to a certain path. Peter, for his part, needed to know how the wash of feelings that flooded him at times related to his early relationship experiences. Being ignored in any way, not being seen, was a powerful trigger for him. Sometimes he would jump suddenly from negotiating with the children to yelling at them. If Denise cut short a discussion when they had a disagreement, he would sulk around the house. But if she retreated to her office and locked the door, he might flip out. I'm getting itch on my nose, literally, it's very frustrating. If Denise cut short the discussion when they had a disagreement, he would sulk around the house. But if she retreated to her office and locked the door, he might flip out and start beginning banging to be let in. And at the music school where he taught, he might explode with frustration if he wasn't consulted about a change in his students' scheduled lesson. The director ignored and disrespected him, he said. These low road reactions suggested that his prefrontal cortex was vulnerable to going offline and that his right hemisphere processes could overwhelm the balancing influence of the left. In effect, Peter tended toward chaos while Denise tended toward rigidity. They were trapped on opposite banks of the river of integration. If, like Dinas, you have spent your childhood in an emotional desert, linking to otherhood, it no nourishing attunement, and in fact might be dysregulating your windows of tolerance for mutual connections, much less deep intimacy would be quite narrow. One strategy would be to adapt by shutting down the circuit that reminded you repeatedly of what was missing. If Denise's parents never spoke of their feelings after the death of her brother, if they never even acknowledged the loss, it's unlikely that Denise would have felt safe in any part of her internal world. There would have been little joining, a few moments of the resonance that creates a wee little closeness to ease her sense of isolation. Peter's childhood history with responsible but absent father and inconsistent caregiving from both his mother and his sister had shaped his resonance circuitry in a different way. His support was intermittent, and both his sister's addictions and his mother's reliance on pain medication had probably created times of overwhelming and unpredictable communication. His mother had been emotionally blunted by depression as well. Growing up with a depressed mother has been shown to significantly affect the developing brain of the child. For the child, it's like living in chronic still phase experiment. During his early years, Peter would have needed to amplify his attachment circuits to attempt any kind of connection, and his window of tolerance for disconnections would have narrowed so that at any hint of rejection, he would withdraw in misery or erupt in chaotic anger. I took care to explain to Denise and Peter that although his present state of mind was in part a product of his difficult past, the despair and loneliness Peter was experiencing now were responses to real and ongoing experiences with Denise in the present. However, the pattern of response that had been shaped in his childhood had helped to fuel the ongoing negative feedback loop in which he and Denise were trapped. With Denise's reactive withdrawal from his neediness, pushing him even further into isolation and hopelessness. We could focus our work on their current lives, and the past would come with us, ready to be eliminated and explored. The question now was whether he could calm his anguish enough to help enough to help create a healing space for each of them so that they could achieve more connection both in their individual minds and in their relationships, breaking their cycle of agitation and disconnections was not the responsibility of either alone. Somehow, the dyadic system, the dysfunctional way this couple acted together, had to be changed. Peter's choice was this: if he wished to move forward with Denise as his partner, he would need to learn to regulate his internal distress more effectively so that a broad range of responses from Denise would not throw him into a tailspin. Denise's own work would involve learning to become more connected, first to her own body and emotions, and then to Peter's internal world. She would also be challenged to widen her window for taking in Peter's signal so that his needs wouldn't automatically push her into retreat. I described these as two growth ages that might be the first focus of longer therapy. After a week away of reflection, both Peter and Denise elected to continue our work together past our original 6 weeks, 6 week starting point. The morning before our next session, distorted mirrors. The morning before our next session, I woke with the tune of one of my favorite songs, James Taylor's Carolina in my mind, playing in my head. It had acquired some new words. In my mind, I'm driven by mirror neurons. Can't you just see intention? Can't you just feel emotion? And it's just like history to seek from behind, cause I'm driven by mirror neurons in my mind. There is a holy host of others gathered between us. Maybe we are on the dark side of the road and it seems like it goes on and on forever. You must forgive me, cause in my mind, I'm driven by mirror neurons. Oh, yeah. Now, I wasn't about to share my musical musings with Denise and Peter, but Those words reminded me of where we needed to go. As you may recall from writing the resonance circuits, mirror neurons are the antennae that pick up information about the intentions and feelings of others, and they create in us both emotional resonance and behavioral imitation. We engage in mirroring automatically and spontaneously without conscious effort or intention. In my mind, the host of others that put us on the dark side of the road are the suboptimal influences of our early relationship that dim or distort our mirrors. Now, our mirror neurons system learns by how it couples our own internal state with what we see in someone else. After explaining this to Denise and Peter, I asked them to consider how their individual lives in the past might have created the activity they experienced with each other. It was striking, I said, that when I had interviewed them alone, each was not only not only receptive to me but also open to the virtues of the other. Yet, when they were together, everything seemed to fall apart. Maybe we should just live in separate houses, Denise quipped. She was smiling fully for the first time in our three-way session. Her use of we was also a good sign. I had noticed that she rarely used it in talking about Peter and herself, and I wondered if she never thought in those terms. Now, avoidant attachment creates an impaired sense of the importance of joining. With the blocked sharing of right hemisphere signals. These are the very signals the mirror neuron system uses to simulate the other within ourselves and to construct the neural map of our interdependent sense of self. We use it's how we can be both an I and part of an us. Denies I didn't seem to have developed much of this capacity. Now consider Peter's mirror neuron. As a baby, he is born ready to connect, ready to link what he sees in others with what he does and with what he feels inside. But what if those others are sometimes attuned and clear, but more often not available, and still other times intrusive and bewildering? Unreliability and confusion come to permeate in others' minds. They shape how he experiences his own mind and even how he creates himself. He has, in simple terms, a confused inner self. Others are sometimes attuned and clear, but more often not available, and at still other times intrusive and bewildering. Unreliability and confusion come to permeate what Peter sees in others' mind. They also shape how he experiences his own mind and even how he creates and knows himself. He has, in simple terms, a confused inner self. Peter's preoccupied adult narrative suggests an ambivalent attachment as a child and a consequent amping up of his attachment system. He would have been thrown repeatedly into a reactive state of alarm. Is my attachment figure here to soothe and protect me? Can I depend on her to see me and keep me safe? These experiences would have primed Peter's brain to be especially challenged by his mother's depression and her unresolved grief after his father's death, none of which he could heal. He had once said, "No matter how hard I practiced and performed, no matter how hard I tried," they also became a part of his implicit memories, free floating states of mind from the past that were capable of shaping his state of mind in the present. Studies have demonstrated that the brains of people with a history of ambivalent attachment are in fact more sensitive to negative feedback. Their limbic system, amygdala fires off more readily in response to angry faces. Peter's sensitivity to denials, hostility, and rejection fit this picture well. The same studies revealed that in people with avoidant streaks, the circuits for social rapport are actually damped down. They respond less to smiling faces. Now, this would help to explain denials' resistance even to positive attempts to connect on Peter's part. If Denise and Peter could see their differences as best partly in different brain sensitivities, they might be able to move beyond their habit of mutual blame. Enter the body. I knew these ideas were a lot for Denise and Peter to take in, but I wanted the framework of our work to be clear. Neither was to blame for their current situation, and they would need each other to support their personal and relational growth. In addition to truly take in the other, they needed to be open to all the subcortical sensation from the limbic areas, the brainstem, and the entire body. That would create and reveal resonance. Before they could become a we, I had to help both of them find the connection to their own bodies, which I would do by teaching each of them the body scan. In our next session, with all of these in my mind, I felt deeply moved when I observed Denise and Peter performing the body scan together with focus and intention. When they both emerged from the internal practice, there was a calm in the room that I could feel, but I can't really describe. Their faces looked softer. The tone of Denise's voice felt more relaxed. The worry on Peter's face had melted away. There was an openness, even after his first practice, that I think they both could also feel. I didn't say much about it, but the three of us seemed to be breathing signs of relief. In subsequent sessions, a brief body scan would become a place for us to start or to turn to when they needed a pause from an interaction that was becoming reactive. Grounding themselves in this inner world of the body created a safer place for both of them. Attuned couples link together in a mental love-making, a joining of minds in which two people create that beautiful resonant sense of becoming a we. The intimacy that blossoms can be amazing, but the journey to get there and remain there can be rough. To become linked as we, a couple needs also to become differentiated as two me's. Denise's growth age required that she widen the hub of her mind to enable her to become aware, safely and slowly, of bodily feelings and limbic emotional states that had previously eluded the radar of her conscious attention. I just turned on my one of the profile, which is work. As you can see here in notification, might be you are not able to see notification, but I turn it on work, because if I turn, then people will get to know that I'm working if they are calling actually, and I'm not gonna get any notification here. So because of that, I turn on it. And the limbic emotional states that had previously eluded the radar, of her conscious attention. I taught her in a simple process for deliberately accessing the sensations, images, feelings, and thoughts that she had previously shut out using shift. As her checklist, I checked her to sort through her responses to ordinary daily events. Denise was usually aware of her thoughts. She was comfortable in her logical left hemisphere, but there was a whole new world she needed to explore, the sensation, images, and feelings of her right hemisphere, including the deep longings that had been hidden away since childhood. Shifting her experiences was a gradual, safe way to begin this exploration. Peter worked on his own growth edge to widen his windows of tolerance for being alone As he became more attuned to his body, he used his left hemisphere's emerging capacity to name it, to tame it. When Denise needed time to go inward and work things out during a discussion, he would become aware of his heart starting to pound, his jaw clenching, and his hands tightening into fists. Then he would use the mental notation he had learned in mindfulness practice, anger or frustration or despair, to label his feelings. He found that if he paused, the rush of feeling would just arise and fall in the space of his mind. As he had learned to say, a feeling is not a fact. That is absolutely right. Feeling is not a fact. It's just a feeling. So we don't have to believe on our feelings. Harnessing the hub of his mind, Peter could now use the strength of his left hemisphere to label and describe, to approach and not withdraw. He still had all the power of his right hemisphere. The internal feelings and maps of his body were fully present. But his inner world was no longer throwing him into chaos. Once Denise and Peter had begun to create more integration within themselves, I felt they were ready to focus more directly on their relationship with each other. I wanted to help each of them sense the mind of other with respect, to be able to share their memories and narratives. Then they could, as a couple, make sense of their individual past experiences and understand how their story together had been molded in part by the adaptation they had made to survive their childhoods. Now together they could help themselves discover the world of we. I challenged each of them to become an expert in sensing and respecting the other's mind. With circuitry, openness, and acceptance that create love, each could approach the other as both interpreter and supporter. The job for each of for you the job for each of you, I said, is to become the advocate of the internal world of the other. With this assignment, Denise would try to read the non-verbal cues coming from Peter and let her own body be receptive to whatever she was sensing in him. Now she could let her mirror neuron system just soak in his signals and shift her own internal state. At the beginning of our work, Denise would probably have checked out at the very thought of this assignment, but by this time she was able to not only stay receptive but also to become an active advocate for Peter. Now, one day when the couple came in, Peter told this story. 2 days earlier, he had learned that a new instructor was being promoted to head the piano section at his conservatory. Peter had seniority. He had wanted job. Now this new man would be his boss. In the past, Denise had expressed a lot of opinion about Peter's mild manners at work. She had pointed out repeatedly that they kept him from asserting himself or getting what she thought he deserved. Here, I would like to say one thing as I am reading, because there is one thought that was coming into my mind related to growing oneself. So many people don't like to read books. Why they don't like to read books? Because like sometimes whenever we read a book we feel sleepy. Sometimes we don't like to read. Don't like in the sense, if we didn't get the things, then at the time we think that, oh man, it's boring. And actually if you don't get the things, if you don't understand, then it feels very boring reading it. I sometimes also feel very boring. But if you are habitual of reading, then you'll get to know that even if you are trying first time, second time, third time, then you'll get to know that yes, it works. You start to understand, and if you started to understand, then you'll get to know that you started liking it. Sometime if it is really interesting you, means it is making you interest in it, then definitely you will like it. So what I'm trying to say here is that why I'm doing this reading challenge on YouTube in the sense like here, because I want to grow myself in the sense today whatever I am here, it's like there are lots of things that which another YouTubers have, like the way of explanation, all those things. I'm learning those. Here, just notice one thing. I was just trying to avoid some negative sentences here. Like I was just trying to say that other YouTubers has a good speaker, or whoever gives speeches. He has a good explanation way of saying, like good storytelling and all those things, that I'm trying to learn here. That I didn't say that whatever they had I don't have it in me, because it's completely negative sentence and you have to avoid negative sentence. Like my complete focus is on it, that we don't have to say any negative words. So what I'm trying to say here, if I'm performing these every day, if I'm trying to understand myself, if I try to understand that who I am, then I will be able to change myself. If then I will be able to get the things that I want. I will be able to do the things that people will like, because I'm observing myself and I'm doing those changes in me. That is why I'm doing live streaming. Using live streaming, I'm just trying to speak with people, and if I'm going to speak, then definitely things will grow up. Things will like come up, like how I'm speaking. Like see, there are some things that I'm mumbling. There are some of the things I'm like getting incorrect. No, I can't say incorrect, but I'm just trying to make the sentence so that you can understand. I'm just trying to convey the things to you so that like you'll be able to understand it. So eventually what I'm trying to do here is that I'm trying to grow myself, I'm trying to improve myself in each, uh, first of all, in speaking, in behaving, like how I am behaving, what is my body language and all those things. I'm just trying to improve this with the help of this live streaming and reading. That is why I'm doing this, and it really will help me, as well as my pronunciation, as well as there are reading. There are lots of things I guess that is improving. So yeah, why I said, because I was feeling that there could be any people who can join and they can say, oh, what the heck he's doing. He just read the things and just making sure that what is my goal that people should know about. Goal in the sense, ultimately not a goal actually, I can't say purpose. The purpose here is to improve myself as well as you guys as well. And it's very itching, literally so much itching. My nose is itching literally too much. I was reading here somewhere. Disappointed when he came home. Let me read again this same paragraph. One day, when the couple came in, Peter told this story. 2 days earlier, he had learned that a new instructor was being promoted to head the piano section at his conservatory. Peter had seniority, and he had wanted the job. Now this new man would be his boss. In the past, Denise had expressed a lot of opinion about Peter's mild manners at work. She had pointed out repeatedly that they kept him from asserting himself or getting what she thought he deserved. But now Denise realized that being Peter's advocate was not only a matter of recognizing his musical talent or defending his right to a proper promotion. This time she was able to simply stay open to his feelings of disappointment when he came home. She asked me about how I felt. Peter said, and she wanted to know all the details about how I heard the news and how I responded. He went on. In the past, she would have just complained that I was a wimp and told me what I should have done. I couldn't believe how she was just listening to me. I felt good. I thought for an instant that Denise might focus on the wimp issue and be offended, but she was smiling. She spoke right to Peter. She said, I could feel how down you were the minute you walked in the door, and then you told me about that guy. I knew it must have been hard for you. I thought about Maggie, about how your mother favored her, and about how the director just did the same to you. Instead of adding to Peter's humiliation, Denise had aligned herself with his internal world and became his true advocate. In his own words, Peter was blown away by the idea that Denise could usually see him and defend his right to his own feelings. Peter, in turn, was consciously trying to respect Denise's need for a bit more distance, especially at times of stress. This was new for Peter, holding Denise's needs in mind without impulsively expressing his frustration when she did not immediately meet his desire for closeness. He was learning the power of cortical override to squirt that go from his middle prefrontal region down to his irritated amygdala to soothe its firing. Each of them was intentionally stretching their early adaptations to meet the other somewhere in the middle. I hoped that the goodwill embodied in these intentions would activate feelings of safety in both Denise and Peter, allowing their alert modes to relax into a feeling of connection and openness. It was as if their middle prefrontal region at the top of their resonance circuitry were learning a new way of being. The key was not to take their own or the others' old patterns of responses so seriously or so personally. Simply put, reactivity cuts off seeing clearly. They had to unlearn those old automatic responses before they could create a new, more receptive state together. As Denise came to appreciate Peter's effort and his newfound ability to give her space, her own growth age moved. She began to notice new inner sensation, tiredness in her throat, heaviness in her chest, and an empty feeling in her belly. She was learning to just let this sensation be instead of shoving them away. Sometimes she would know now what they meant, but often she simply had to sit with them. She said that she was beginning to trust her body to let her know what mattered, even if my head tells me that nothing is going on. Now I can feel something like an internal alarm that tells me the truth. As the session went on, Denise came to feel more open to these feelings and to her need to be close to Peter. Curiosity about the internal world, her own and Peter's was her starting place. We explored how, as a child, she had never been she had never been given the gift of being seen by others or supported in how she felt. This was something she now shared with Peter. She started to recall a bit about the loneliness and fear she had felt when her brother died, and the strange silence that had filled their house afterward. These weren't dramatic revelations. People with a widened history just don't have vivid autobiographical memories to return to. Ed now denies the mother could mobilize her imagination and empathy for the little girl she would once been. No tears flowed from her eyes, no, but at that moment her vulnerability filled the space between us. To be with Denise in the room that day was like seeing a new way of life open up for her. Something positive had begun to grow in her. A feeling of energy you could sense, a new generosity toward herself, toward Peter, and toward her children. In the moment that a wheel of awareness. In the moment that followed, Denise and Peter embraced the ebb and a flow of their progress. Although when we first began, they had both doubted that change was possible. They were beginning to see the fruits of their labors. We would use part of each sessions to explore issues that had arisen during the week. Disagreements about how to handle the kids, misunderstanding about social plans, things that triggered their old patterns of approach and withdrawal. Woven into our work was continual attention to the unfolding of their shared narrative, connecting present experience with meanings from the past so that challenges became opportunities for further growth. One day, Denise wanted to talk about a night the week before when she she had had to stay at the office very late to finish up a huge project. She had told Peter this was happening, but she had forgotten, and he became angry when she didn't turn up for dinner. He called her at the office, very irritated, and Denise in turn reacted to his forgetfulness. Uh, he hadn't registered this big project, which was so important to her. I told him I would be late, and he just didn't listen to me. She said. But that night, instead of hashing over their grievances, they decided to focus on what the other had felt. I couldn't believe how Denise was when she came home. Peter said, looking over at her with admiration. She just came upstairs and said, "Wow, you have the kids in bed already," and then asked if we could sit down and talk. I said I hoped we could just listen to what the other had to say, like we do here, and own how we felt, not point fingers nor blame. To tell the truth, Denise continued, I was surprised the kids weren't still up running around, and really grateful not to have to deal with them right then. Peter had been working on setting clear limits with the kids and giving them the structure they needed, structure he had never had himself, and which he initially felt guilty and unloving about imposing. It was a new thing for Peter to feel comfortable saying no before he reached the boiling point. Denise went on. Peter said that he had been feeling excited about having dinner with me that night. It was the day after his big concert, and he wanted to talk about all the great feedback he had been getting Now, when I wasn't there, I felt like a rejection. In the old days, I would have just told him to cram it, but I could feel his sadness and I listened. The fact is, I did forget, I didn't appreciate how important that ensemble performance was to him. I messed up, and I admitted it. I could see Denise's openness reflected in Peter's face. Then he said, You know, the details don't even matter that much. Not like the old days when we would nitpick every word and see who could come up with the worst insult. Denise reached across the couch and took Peter's hand. I could understand when Denise told me that she felt hurt, that I didn't remember our big project, and mostly I just felt relieved that we were talking. Instead of blowing up her shutting down, Peter paused for a moment and then said, You know, I really do get it, that I have thin skinned brain, and I can't let it get the best of me. Peter and Denise were becoming a we. Each had a more curious, open, and accepting stance toward their individual and now collective internal words. Denise mentioned that she also felt they were becoming more connected to their children. It sounds kind of funny, but I do feel like I'm tuning in into what they feel and not just reacting to what they do. It's a big difference. Peter just smiled and nodded in agreement. At the end of that session, Peter helped Denise on with her coat, and I noticed that Denise put her hand on his shoulder as she turned to say goodbye to me. They left that day, headed to the home and life they were building together. This is the essence of mindsight. We must look inward to know our own internal world before we can map clearly the internal state. The mind of other. As we grow in our ability to know ourselves, we become receptive to knowing each other. knowing each other. Yeah, and as a V is woven into the neuron of our mirroring brains, even our sense of self is illuminated by the light of our connection. With internal awareness and empathy, self empowerment, and joining, differentiation, and linkage, we create harmony within the resonating circuits of our social brains. 12, chapter 12, time and tides, confronting uncertainty and modality. When I was in my early teens, some evenings I would ride my bike from my home to the beach and wander along the wide strips of sand to the ocean's edge. I would watch the waves and be filled with wonder about life, the ideas, the sea, the force of the moon beckoning the water, raising it up toward the cliffs, then pulling it back down beyond the rocky pools, back out to sea. These tides, I thought, would continue their eternal cycle long after I was gone from this earth. That's correct. I wasn't alone in these thoughts as an adolescent. The adolescent brain changes, especially in the prefrontal cortical regions, so that we begin to reflect on the self and on life, on time and mortality, acknowledging the transience, trans, transience of the things around us and of our own existence. By the age of 3 or 4, children have begun to think in concrete terms about death. They realize that people and pets don't live forever. By then, our prefrontal regions have also developed enough to begin to view our life stories. As we move into our elementary school years, our memories move with us and time becomes embedded into our worldview. In adolescence, we enter another phase in our prefrontal capacity to sense time. We begin to dream of the future, to wonder about the meaning of life, and grapple with the reality of death. When the human brain evolved enough to represent time, the mind riding along its neural firing patterns was presented with an important challenge. On the one hand, we have the cortical propensity to create a sense of continuity and coherence, the drive to create a narrative to connect past, present, and future. These cortical connections were the view a sense of certainty, giving us a feeling that we can know and control our lives. Within these firing patterns, there is also a drive for permanence, a denial that death means finality. Yet, in addition to permitting the mind to create these dreams of permanence, certainty, and immortality, the brain is also an information processor that gives us tools to see reality clearly. The prefrontal cortex enables us to know, though we may not readily accept this knowledge, that life is actually temporary, uncertain, and bounded by birth and death. As Vladimir Nabokov put it in the opening to his memoir, Speak Memory, the Cardal rocks Abu and a bias, and common sense tells us that our existence is but a brief crack of light between two eternities of darkness. Transience, transience, uncertainty, and modality. As my own children approached adolescence, they asked if our dogs worried about things like death. I told them that because dogs have no prefrontal cortex to speak of, theirs is a relatively simple set of sense and simple life of living in the moment without worries about the future. We now know that some of our fellow mammals, such as elephants, have complex form of grieving and many more certainly suffer in anticipation of harm. Not being able to enter their internal world, we don't know how much they may share our capacities. Some might say burden to be able to represent ourselves complex images of life and death and our journey through time. While many different animals Spaces have nervous systems that enable anticipation of events. For example, learning that a flash it is associated with a reward in a conditioned learning experiment. Planning for the future seems to be a prefrontal invention to create representations that move the imagination into the future is the legacy of prefrontal development. This crowning glory of our prefrontal capacity to remove itself from today and plan for tomorrow allows us to build buildings, create educational programs, and fly to the moon. In many ways, the prefrontal region can be called the cortex humanitas. That it is. In that it is essential for so much that is in unequally human. As we have seen, much of the brain beneath the cortex is involved in here and now bodily and sensory processes such as digestion and respiration or taking in data from the outside world. Now, this is the work of our the five external senses and the interoceptions. Now, our six bodily sense. Now, when we move forward in the cortex toward the front knuckles and fingernail region in our hand, the model of the brain, we come to a neural capacity to perceive things not directly rooted in the physical world in front of our eyes. This is our seventh sense. The seventh sense allows us to perceive the mind and to create a representation of time, not just feel the passage of our days. It tells us that things die, that nothing lasts forever. Our capacity to perceive patterns teaches us about change, and that transience is the law of life. At the same time, we are aware of our power to influence the things and people around us, so we try to predict and control to fill our world with safety and certainty. Yes, the prefrontal cortex enables our mind to plan, dream, imagine, and reflect, and to continually reinvent itself as life moves forward. It creates the seemingly infinite potential of the human mind, but these capacities come at a price. When I was 14 years old, I was in charge of the garden in the back of our old Spanish style single story home. We grew tangerines, plums, peaches, and even figs in the blazing southern California sun. My job was to care for the plants and pick the fruit, and crucially, to water during the hot months in our desert community. I thought it was a great job. That spring thought was particularly rainy, and the strawberry plants were wild with exuberance, sending out streams of runners like an octopus extending its long arms to form a new plants. The snails had come in abundance too, to soak in the moistures and a banquet on the strawberry leaves and a budding fruit. One evening after school, I fetched the snail bed from the garage and sprinkled it over the vines, hoping to preserve the fruit for the farmers as humans. My nose, there are lots of itching on my face, actually on my nose and my lips. I don't know why it happens, but it happens a lot of time whenever I do not do actually. I'm not gonna make any negative sentence here, or that will affect my mind to do the things that I don't like, so I'll avoid saying that. On my nose and my lips there are lots of features that is coming on. There is one more thing that I said that I don't have to look here and there. It's negative sentence, but I'll more prefer to say that I'll see toward my camera, my viewer, and I will interact with you guys. This will making me to think that I have to look into camera. It is just automatically giving me. Now, plus with that, there is more one thing that I said that whenever I'm going to speak, I'm not gonna make feel of it, or I will say continuously in the sense I'll make understand another people of my thoughts, my understanding. Not will not do any fillets. I will say very continuously in the sense I will make another person understand. I will try to make them feel my thoughts, my feelings, whatever I'm feeling right away. That two things I wanted to say. I read the label on the snail bed box, no warning, poison, keep away from small children and pets. No problem. I was the youngest at home and knew enough to wash my hands and pets. Our backyard, guinea pig. The farm had been shut down for a few years, and the other animals were in cages inside the house. I was raising Emerson, the young son of my old dog Prince. Prince was a happy, knee-high, sled pulling mongrel no had found himself a wife, a beautiful stray Belgian Shepherd and Border Collie mix. We sold all of their litter of six puppies except Emerson found a home for the mother too, and I had my hands full with the school, the garden, a huge tank of tropical fish, and two dogs. But 2 months earlier, during one of Prince's long exertion excursion excursions on a route he had been taking for decades. A car struck him. A neighbor came to our house crying to tell us about the accident. My brother carried Prince home and we said goodbye to him before he died and his body was taken away. I was still recovering from his loss, keeping his son Emerson close to me whenever I was home, in honor of his father, and perhaps to keep Prince alive in some way. We renamed his handsome, smart, keen-eyed son Prince Jr. I distinctly remember reading that snail bed box and thinking to myself, I'd better tell my parents not to let Prince Jr. out later, as it often did. I finished my homework, brushed my teeth, washed my face, and went to bed. My young friend sleeping by my side. When I woke up, Prince Jr. was dead. For the longest time, I could not stand to look at myself in the mirror, ashamed of the person I saw staring back. I remembered that night, spreading the bed, reading the box, thinking my thoughts, doing my homework, looking at myself in the mirror as I washed my face. Life felt simple, serene, settled, and then the morning arrived and I realized that I had poisoned my own best friend. And even worse, something I didn't tell anyone. I had in fact read the label, knew what I needed to do to protect him, but just plain forgot. I got into my homework, lost track of that that precaution, and didn't check to be sure everything that needed to be done had been done. A flash forward 11 years, I am working as a senior medical student in a public health clinic near Rincon, a small town on the northwest coast of Puerto Rico. I have taken courses in primary care medicine and tropical diseases and am now serving as doctor for the indigent population living in their surfer's paradise. I don't surf, but I have taken a scuba diving lesson in anticipation of days of exploring the Caribbean reefs and caverns. But now it's just before lunch after a full morning of seeing patients, and I have a vague, uneasy feeling in my belly. I am thinking about Pablo, a toddler I had seen earlier that day with severe ear pain and a fever. After taking the history in my emerging but shaky Spanish and doing his physical exam, I had checked with my attending and we prescribed an antibiotic for what we decided was a significant ear infection. I had had a lot of them as a child and I still remembered the pain and fear. I had watched Pablo and his mom leave the prescription in her right hand, Pablo's hand in her left. Now I don't feel right. I get an image of poisoning Pablo. I had prescribed the antibiotic correctly. too much, and it would destroy not only the bad bacteria in his middle ear but also the delicate hair cells lining the inner ear that allow him to hear. I tell myself that I am just over concerned and I should let it go. I checked with the attending, wrote out the prescription, and it's all just fine. I say in my head, no, but the nagging feeling would go away. Yeah, at the front desk, I find Pablo's chart and look to see what dose I actually wrote down. I discover that I had recorded only the type of medication, not the amount. And then I check for his family's phone number and find that they live in a distant part of town that has no phone service. Tell myself again that everything is probably fine, but I can't rest. I head for the beach, but instead of relaxing there with a sandwich, I start the long trek south toward Pablo's neighborhood. The palms are saving in the easterly winds that so often wrap themselves into hurricanes over this coast. I step over the strewn coconuts, over twisted roots of the palms, hugging the sandy shore. I can still remember the smell of the pungent air, mangoes hanging from the leaden limbs, and the squirrels, and odor of pigs in the yards of the houses ahead. I wander through the unmarked streets and ask repeatedly, don't they? I have to ask people to speak more slowly, but finally I learned that Pablo's family live the next calle down near an empty lot. When I arrive at the house, Pablo and his mother are just inside the front door and very surprised to see me. I asked to see the bottle of medication to check on the dose. I explained. I knew the amount I should have written based on Pablo's weight, but there it was on the bottle. My first major mistake in medicine. I had calculated the correct daily dose, but I had prescribed the full amount 3 times a day instead of in divided dose. Now, one day of overdose wouldn't have been a problem, but 10 days that would have killed the hair cells, destroying Pablo's hearing forever. I don't know. I knew it was a whole body feeling, a gnawing restlessness in my heart and a gut that just would not let go. Something was wrong, and I had to find out what it was. I adjusted the dosage, and when I gave Pablo a hug, a goodbye, and said adios to his mom. Now that's something inside me that had needed to check felt deeply satisfied. I had to drive to be I have died to be certain, perhaps because of Prince Junior death, perhaps because I was in a new role of responsibility. Our minds wrestle with uncertainty all the time, but now I was entering a profession where my drive to know, to be sure, would be activated day and night. Temporal integration was not a luxury, but rather front and center in the work of caring for others. Today, more than ever, medicine is wrestling with these issues. Computer programs enable us to offer precise, step by step checklists to help medical staff perform complex procedures accurately. In some areas, these checklists have dramatically reduced human error and the resulting complications, including death. But no matter how many checklists we advise, we need to remain open to the wisdom of our whole selves as well. To listen to the intuition that is also the gift of the prefrontal cortex. We then can not only check but ultimately feel with clarity that we have taken care of what needs to be done, seeking certainty. Just as the waves in the ocean appear to be rolling in from far away, our mind perceives continuities when they do not exist. We spot a big wave now far out at sea and watch it surge toward the shore. Now, but in reality, the cresting, now whatever we see out there is not the same. Now, water that surge up the beach a few minutes later, the continuity of the wave is a mirage. A wide variety of cognitive experiments suggests that our mental perception are constructed from a cortical drive to make disjoint reality into a fluid flow of experience. For example, our eyes blink frequently, but our brains adjust to the gap in visual input and construct an unbroken picture. The brain has a bias for making the world appear solid and stable. Now, the same could be said about how we develop a continuous sense of self out of the multiple states I explored in chapter 10. And once we learn about cause and effect as young children, we see causal links in every sort of experience, even making them up when they are none. These drive for continuity and predictability runs head on into our awareness of transience and uncertainty. How we resolve the conflict between what is and what we strive for is the essence of temporal integration. What really matters? When I was in high school, there was a period when I was unable to stop thinking about transience and mortality. I remember phoning a classmate to ask her out on a date, or at least that's what I thought I was doing. Lauren, I began, how was your day? She told me about going to the park with friends after school, then shopping for some new shoes. And Danny, now what did you do after school? She asked. Well, I said, not being one for beating around the bush. I was thinking about how one day none of us will exist. I just can't get how we are supposed to take things so seriously, like homework and grades, and are we going to win the championship? We are here right now, but one day we will be gone. There was silence at the other end of the phone. Lauren, are you there? When I heard the click as the hung up, I knew I was alone with my worries again. Ultimately, wrestling with transience and mortality requires that we dive beneath the illusion of permanence and seek deeper meaning in our lives. Now we seek comfort and meaning in various ways, now from religion to science, now from shared rituals to impassioned personal pursuits. Some of these pursuits are Some of these pursuits are a form of facing up to our existential anxieties, others a form of escaping them. A colleague once told me why he worked 7 days a week, sometimes around the clock, on his research projects. If I don't work at solving these scientific puzzles, I'll think about death and become riddled with anxiety and depression. I work like this to stave of becoming morose. Now, we humans spend a lot of energy not facing reality. Now, our avoidance strategies can take many forms, from workaholism, like my scientific colleagues, to obsession with our appearance. Sometimes we become absorbed in the day-to-day realities of meeting our essential needs because now, much if not most of the time, we do need simply to do our homework, go to work, take out the trash, walk the dog, and brush our teeth. Now, we may also seek comfort in the world of physical, absorbed in the consumption of material goods, or getting addicted to the thrill of adrenaline pumping activities. Yet, these are temporary escapes. When we pause from our driven behaviors, we can become overwhelmed with anxiety or lost in a sense of internal emptiness. Without what I am calling temporal integration, we will drift to the banks of their chaos or rigidity. Our human ingenuity and technical skill can mask our fundamental insecurity. Even the first human being who started a fire using a friction and flint must have felt a new command over nature. Knowledge means survival. Whether we found food by distinguishing safe plants from poisons ones, or could predict the seasonal migration of zebra and wild wild beasts. We have an innate drive to seek out predictable situation. We also come hardwired with a preference for familiar faces. The brain's basic system for knowing whom to trust or discerning who is a member of our clan. These ancient sensations, these drives to feel connected and to be concerned, are often directly in conflict with the demands of contemporary culture. We can spend an entire day in a modern city recognizing no one, seeing literally thousands of faces and losing ourselves in anonymity. Our global society dominated as it is by our drive for mastery. It also gives us too much knowledge, flooding us with news of the incalculable daily disasters that can destroy our security in an instant. What happens there is no here as quickly as the click of a mouse. There is one thing that I get in my brain, that you don't need to create a video. Let's say if you are creating a video, if you want to create a channel and you have to upload the video, you don't have to be a very like you're a pro YouTuber. You don't need to create a video that will have very much effects, that will have very good communication, that will have good things. You don't need to do that. Just see where you are, and as per that, create different videos and add some improvement in it each day. You will feel lot better than any other, because you are improving. When we feel improvement in us, then it makes us very happy. It releases dopamine, and there is one more hormone that is very useful in our brain if it really get released. And so what I'm trying to hear, what I felt personally, like earlier when I was trying to create videos, at the time my expectation was to create a good video like a pro YouTuber, but I was not getting that, just because of which I was getting frustrated, I was getting feeling of loser. And so I didn't made anything just because of that. But nowadays I am creating as per me in the sense whatever I'm showing that, and I am improving in that. I'm getting it 1% better than yesterday. I'm not expecting that I have to create a very good video, I have to say something very better that people will listen. It's okay if people will not listen to you, if people will not stay in your live streaming or in your videos. It's okay, because you're not doing for them, you are doing for yourself, to improve yourself, to improve your communication, to improve your character. Yeah, eventually your character will be improved if you are following the things. Let's say if you are persistent, it's the part of your character, so the thing will improve. So why I was telling this, because I thought of one content creator, which is on Instagram. Now her, she is doing very good, very good in the sense, I don't know how she's getting her way of explanation, her way of presenting herself. All the things are really good, and she just started and got too much subscribers, not subscribers but followers. Like it's 100K she did within 3 months, I guess. It's 161, 4 months, I guess. And we are like getting overwhelmed just because of that, because we are thinking that, oh, we need this as well, we should start. And when we start doing the things, we don't get exactly what she's having in her videos, and we get frustrated and we say that this is not for us. And so we don't have to do that, we just have to be whatever we are and just show that and get improved in that. You don't need to see in any other people. You really want to grow, if you really want to have, and if you want to feel happiness in you, because whenever you see yourself that you are improving 1% than yesterday, then definitely it will make you better. It will feel make you feel better than earlier. And my nose is itching. I'm just trying to see the subscribers, because I uploaded one of the video at night, which is related to editing challenge. And what I said in that, basically, editing is not just doing clipping, adding effects, transitions and all those things. It's more than that. If a person knows the editing, like if I gave content to the person who is editor, he can arrange the things, do the things. But for those content, to create that content, you need to think more, you need to think a lot. So I call this as editing for all of those things. How you record yourself, how you see yourself, what is your thoughts behind your story, what you want to give to people, all those things. I thought about it as a editing, so I'm learning that. So I stated that it's more related to that, and I will do the things likewise only. I just don't have to learn the editing like doing some effects and all those things. I want to learn these skills which will make another person feel my thoughts, my feelings, and all those things. So let me start reading. What can we do? Our species adapts, learns to make, to do, to live in mega cities of millions. Bombarded by information from around the planet, but many of us find that we either numb ourselves to cope, or we become painfully aware of the fragility of our condition. How do we find peace of mind? Where are the spaces? The mental structure is sanctuaries. No structure is. Where I was reading sanctuaries, where we can put our heads down on pillow, are certain of our personal and collective survival. The longing for simplicity and shelter still steers in our synaptic circuitry. Enter the checker. Sandy was 12 years old, and she knew she shouldn't be afraid of the sharp edges of desks, and or worried that sharks might be swimming in the next door neighbor's pool. Behind the long bangs that hung over her face, she looked both embarrassed and terrified as she described these fears and the ritual she had to deal with them. Sandy's parent told me that for the first 4 months of the school year, she had done well in her new middle school, had made new friends, and was getting along well with them and with her younger brother. But over the last 6 weeks, Sandy had become plagued by troubling fears and compulsive behaviors. Sandy told me that whenever she thought about the ages of desks or about sharks, she had to count in her head or tap an even number of times with fingertips of both hands. It turned out that she worried about other disasters as well. Earthquakes destroying her house. This was Los Angeles. After all, fires raging through town. She queried quite intently about the possibility that a shark might find its way into the sewers, come up into the toilet and bite her. The external facts were that there had been recent quake. The hills just north of the town had been blazed, and a surfer in Malibu had been attacked by a shark. Seeing this item on the news had provided some of the content of her obsession, but Sandy's mind was clearly primed for danger. I asked Sandy what would happen if she didn't tap or didn't count to an even number in her head. She paused for a moment, looking scared, and then said, I don't want to find out. She talked more about fires and earthquakes and her fear of sharks in her neighbor's pool. The weekend before Sandy's family brought her to see me, she had sat the edge of the pool during an entire afternoon party and wouldn't even put her feet in. It seemed to me that Sandy might be developing a form of anxiety called obsessive compulsive disorder. Is characterized by recurrent thoughts, obsession in the form of frightening images or irrational ideas. Individuals with OCD often feel stuck in a thought, a pattern, or behavioral habit they just can't escape. They may have a persistent sense of self doubt, doubt, hiccup, that drives them to check repeatedly to make sure they have locked a door or turned off the stove. They may also exhibit outward behaviors, compulsion such as prolonged repeated hand washing that are triggered by their internal sense that something is just not right. If they enact the compulsion or think in a certain way, such as continuing or repeating a special verbal formula, they believe that had things will be avoided, and they often worry that if these obsessions or compulsions are not enacted correctly, something will go seriously wrong. Someone might die or become ill, and they would be responsible for falling to prevent it. Still, others suffer from a conviction that they are murderers, child abusers, or otherwise immoral people, and that the obsessive compulsive behaviors will somehow wipe out these crimes or prevent their being enacted in the first place. OCD can come on suddenly following exposure to the streptococcus bacterium. A protein on its surface elicits an immune response that can irritate the neural circuits that are underlie OCD. But Sandy had no history of strep infections, no obvious recent stressors. Stressors. No accidents, no big changes in her family life. The only significant event that had occurred was starting middle school, something I made a note to discuss with her later if she came to me for therapy. Some physician who diagnose OCD, whatever the situation surrounding its onset, offer anxiety medication immediately, even in children. But given the potential side effect of these drugs, especially in growing children, and then the fact that they alleviate symptoms only and only for as long as they are taken, I felt that we should start with a different approach. Research with adults had shown that offering a cognitive and behavioral approach to therapy combined with mindfulness techniques and information about the brain could work as well as medication and with more lasting effectiveness. We didn't have such studies for children, but I had developed a strategy that adapted similar approaches to the developmental needs of the child. My own clinical experience had shown that the same strategies that worked for teens and adults worked for children too. Another reason I was open to exploring a medication free approach was that the onset of Sandy's OCD was recent and it was not as disabling as some chronic or severe cases I had seen. I had seen if the worry circuits are repeatedly activated over a long period, they can become ingrained in the brain and much harder to alter. But since Sandy had been afflicted for a relatively brief period, I felt that I could wait to see if the strategies I proposed to use would work. If the early signs were not encouraging, we could try other cognitive approaches, or if necessary, turn to medication. I certainly wanted to give Sandy some immediate relief from her intrusive thoughts and from the ritual behavior that were taking her over. But I also wanted to offer her the chance to develop a new self regulatory skill at the level of her brain that might last a lifetime. My first goal was to demystify Sandy's condition somewhat so she would feel less crazy and frightened by what was going on in her head. With her parents present, I told her that we each have certain brain circuits that have evolved over millions of years to keep us safe. Using my hand model of the brain, I explained that this circuitry involves the fight flight freeze system of the brainstem, the fear producing amygdala of the limbic area, and the worrying and planning prefrontal cortex. The activation of survival reflexes and the emotion of fear push upper cortical areas to find danger, sometimes when a threat is truly there, and sometimes when the sense of danger is only our brain's creation. Because this brain system checks for danger, I like to call it the checker. The checker has survived over hundreds of millions of years. I said it was helping animals long before there were humans, and it takes its job seriously. Now, what would happen? Now, asked Sandy. If the checker took a long vacation and you were crossing the street, Sandy's eyes widened and she exclaimed, you would get run over by a car or a truck. Exactly. So, prehistoric animals without checkers didn't survive. They wouldn't check for saber-toothed tigers at the watering hole, and they would be they had been eaten up before they were reproduced. I knew Sandy understood the basics of genetics and evolution when she added, "Yeah, only those animals that had checkers made it. So then their babies had checkers and they made it too." But sometimes I added our well-meaning checker get a bit overexcited and think of it like this. Now, I said, if a friend comes over and wants to ride a bike with you, Sandy had already told me she liked bike riding but wanted to pedal 45 hours non-stop. Now, what would you say? Sandy laughed and said, no way. Fine, but instead of just saying no, now what if you offered an alternative that you could both live with? What if you said, yes, let's ride, but let's ride for just 45 minutes, not 40 hours, 45 hours? Sandy agreed that she and her friend could both have fun that way. The same is true with the checker. I went on. The idea is to have the checker curb its enthusiasm and for you to realize that deep inside, the checker just wants to protect you. By the end of the first evaluation session, I could sense that Sandy felt a bit of relief. She knew that we all have checkers. Some of us have more active checkers than others, but this was a normal part of being human. With this knowledge, Sandy and her parents were open to my teaching her some mindfulness practices and other techniques for working directly with the checker. I was not entirely surprised when her mother said that she too struggled with some similar issues and asked if she could join some of my suggestions with Sandy. Sandy had never heard about her mother's problem with the checker, and she was happy that they could work on this together. Her mother's openness about having similar symptoms revealed problem some possible genetic vulnerability to anxiety or OCD. But I knew that we could still do the work necessary to change their brains. A time greed, of great uncertainty. During the first stage of Sandy's treatment, I met with her parents and with Sandy alone and with the entire family, so I could hear their different perspective on what might be going on. In private time with Sandy, I explored whether she had had any dangerous personal encounters, arguments that left her fearful, or incidents of inappropriate touch. She reported none, and I thought that her onset of symptoms might be understood partly as a result of the change in her school and the sudden changes in her body and feelings as she went through puberty. As I discussed in chapter 5, the prefrontal cortex is being remodeled during the preteen and adolescent years, and these changes in the brain may themselves be enough to disrupt the ability to self-regulate in the face of fear. Having an overactive checker during this period is not rare. If you look back at your own adolescence, you may remember various rituals and repeating thoughts, coupled with time honored superstitions. Knocking on wood, never walking under ladder, wearing a special shirt on game days, that are relatively mild version of the checker at work. If, in addition, Sandy had a genetic predisposition for anxiety, hearing the news of recent natural disasters might have put her fear circuits on high alert. What could she do to feel What could she do to feel in control, to soothe herself when the world around her and her own adolescent world within was filled with uncertainty? One way was to behave as if she could shape the outcome of events by her own efforts. Enter the checker. The checker is the neural pinnacle of prediction. There is nothing like the checker's system of dealing with danger to help us, at least on the surface. Now, to take on uncertainty, the checker creates a three-part strategy I like to call SAM. And first, the checker scans for danger, ever vigilant for what might hurt us. Now, next, the checker sounds an alert of fear and anxiety whenever something threatening seems to be about to happen. And finally, the checker motivates us to take action to prevent the danger from occurring. Now, under normal conditions, the checker reminds to look both ways before we cross the street, creates a spike of alarm when we see a truck barreling toward us, and then motivates us to get out of the way either by staying put on the sidewalk or speeding up to get to the other side. Now that's the checker in its most helpful role, and Sandy needed to know that the checker's SAM process was her friend and guardian. But if the checker gets overactive and works with too much enthusiasm, then we can be paralyzed by its activities. The checker may constantly imagine the worst case scenario, even when nothing is in fact at risk. The overactive checker adopts the strategy that the best defense is to be prepared for the worst. Then you will never be taken by surprise when the checker goes overboard. Its excesses can take the form not only of vigilance and alarm, but also of the obsessive thoughts and compulsive behaviors that are typical of OCD and are irrationally believed to help prevent disaster. Despite the fact that many OCD patients are painfully aware that their behaviors and thought patterns don't make sense, the checker creates an intolerable internal sensation that something needs completion, something must be enacted, and performing the behavior can relieve, if only temporarily, this nagging sense of dread. This, as of my young patient said, is OCD overactive checkers deployment. Now imagine that you have listened to the obsessive thought or carried out the compulsive ritual. If nothing bad has happened, no earthquakes, fires, or shark attacks have occurred, your brain has convinced itself that your OCD actions are the reason for your survival. The checker was right. It's a matter of simple cause and effect. The checker has succeeded in its effort to keep you and others safe, so its strategy is reinforced. Patients are often convinced of these. After all, the checker is devoted to our survival and to passing along our checker genes for another 100 million years. No, so this is no joking matter. My nose easily. Focusing the mind change the brain. Actually, what is happening? I'm listening some of the voice from outside, which is like from a family itself. I thought something happened, so I was just concentrating on that, like if is everything fine or not. So yeah, it's everything fine. Sometimes it happens that like if you heard some voices, then it triggered your like there's neurons, some of the neuron that take care of the things. So it just get triggered, and I was just like listening that is if everything is fine or not. So yeah, let me start reading it again. Like as you can see, I am getting very much sweat. I don't know why, but yeah, that was okay. You might be wondering how any intervention that involved more reflection on the internal world could help someone who already was troubled by anxiety and obsessions. Shouldn't Sandy be helped to get on with life rather than focusing even more deeply on her mind? In fact, this approach helping Sandy reframe her symptoms as a part of a normal but overactive brain circuit and teaching her mindful awareness strategies works into ways encounts the patients and help to alleviate symptoms, and it also begins a process of bolstering the self-regulatory circuits in the brain. At the beginning of our second session, I reviewed the concept of the overactive checker, and we discussed how that week at home and school had gone. Then I taught Sandy and her mother the basic meditation I have used throughout this book. They learned quickly to enter a state in which they could sense their breathe and become aware, like I'm watching myself from outside myself. Sandy later told me she and her mother agreed to practice together each morning for 5 or 10 minutes, like many children and adolescents. Sandy told me that at times she felt it was weird just sitting watching myself, my head, but soon as she became more comfortable with the practice, this sense of observation came with a feeling of relief. Sometimes she realized she could just sit with herself and not have to do anything about her thoughts. I was just thinking about it and it happened. So sometimes it happens. Excellent connection. This emerging sense of discernment did not, by itself, eliminate Sandy's worries or her drive to tap, but it did begin to lessen their intensity. She told me how she just counted silently to herself or hid her hand under her desk at school so no one would see her tapping. But she was still distressed at the notion of what would happen if she didn't count or tap. During our third or fourth sessions, I began to address Sandy's compulsive behaviors. I wanted to create a little space between her automatic rituals and the impulse that preceded them. I asked Sandy to try spotting the moment when the checker is just speaking up and beginning to get agitated. Now, what was going on inside at that time? Could she detect some inner sensation of fear or worry or dread? As her capacity for mindfulness emerged, Now felt she could begin to recognize her obsession and compulsion as being the result of the checkers activities. This was a variation on the name it to name it. The strategy I mentioned in chapter 6. Now, way to calm limbic firing by recurring the left mode of processing. If she could identify and label the checker at work and recognize that the checker has its own drives and needs, she could begin to differentiate it from the sheer terror she had been experiencing, knowing that it's a distinct circuit in her brain, not the whole of her, would provide the crucial step in liberating Sandy from the automaticity of her anxiety driven thoughts and behaviors. Now, once Sandy could detect her obsession or compulsive urges arising, we moved to the third phase of treatment. Now she was not only to observe the checker at work but also to engage it in the kind of internal dialogue I had described in our first meeting. Internal dialogue, sometimes called self talk, is a normal and important. Is a normal and important part of the moment to moment operation of our minds. I simply wanted to harness this internal conversation to help Sandy soothe her distress. Sandy liked the idea of talking to the checker. Now, it turned out she had already picked up the SAM of scan, alert, motivate, and transformed it into a name. Sam is short for Samantha. I thought that this was an encouraging sign. She was befriending. Sorry, excuse me. Befriending this troublesome part of herself. We started to do role plays around different scenarios. Suppose she was having lunch in her neighbor's backyard and the checker got activated. What would it say? Checker, don't get too close to the edge of that pool. They might jump out and grab you. Sandy, inside her own head, thank you, Sam, for your love and concern. I know you want to keep me safe, and I want to be safe too. But your enthusiasm is too much, and it's not necessary to keep me safe. At this stage, I told her, you don't have to change your behavior, but the dialogue needs to begin. It's okay if you want to sit as far from the pool as you can, or if you tap or count, just make sure you talk with the checker first. This kind of dialogue is in sharp contrast to the internal battle that often takes place before treatment. Sandy's mother told as how she used to criticize herself when her worries came up. These worries are so dumb. This is ridiculous. Just shut up. Or I can't believe how stupid I am. What an idiot. If you have a fight with yourself, who can win? No one can win. Everyone will lose. When we see the checker as an alternative state of mind that needs to be embraced, not destroyed, progress can unfold. Why embraced? Because a circuit that has been helping our ancestors survive for millions of years needs to be appreciated for its hard work. If it had failed at its job, you wouldn't be there. Here, also, whether you are 12 or 92, you are probably not going to win a battle against a brain circuit that's at least 100 million years old. In an integrative approach, the winning strategy is respect and collaborations. Sandy's new relationship with the checker gave us an opening for the next step, reducing her ritual behaviors through negotiation. Sandy had been tapping up to 14 times, always an even number, whenever she experienced her fearful thoughts, and this could happen many times an hour. However, we had been discussing the motivation behind the tapping ritual, that it was a way of making sure nothing had happened. Sandy and I made an agreement for the following week. Whenever the checker told her to tap, she would tap 10 times instead of 14. Each time I told her the checker would probably voice an objection, but Sandy would simply reply, thank you for sharing. I know you think tapping will keep us safe, but 10 times is just fine. The following week, Sandy would reduce the taps from 10 to 8 and in later weeks down to 6, 4 and then 2. Each time she would continue to thank and reassure the checker. Of course, I could only hope that nothing happened accidentally while Sandy was decreasing her tapping. Luckily, there were no wildfires in the hills or shark
sighting of the beaches to encourage the checker to say, I told you so, and Sandy made steady progress when necessary, even in the middle of her school day. She would focus on her breath to calm herself or use the spatial place imagery we had also developed together. A problem arose only when Sandy went from the last even number 2 down to just one tap and odd number. Sam, it appeared, loved symmetry, and moving to one turned out to be a bigger deal than decreasing the total number of taps. This stage took several weeks. The final stage involved Sandy negotiating with Sam about frequency of these signals. The single taps. First, she allowed her checker one tap an hour, then five a day, and so on until she was down to one. Then, one afternoon, she arrived for her regular session and told me, just I just realized that I didn't tap yesterday. We never did figure out our desks and not kitchen tables or counters or any other flat rectangular surfaces where the focus of Sandy's fear was the perhaps feelings cornered by her challenging new schoolwork and the sharks. As a scuba diver, I had been trained to fear sharks, but in Sandy's case, all it took was seeing one news report of shark attack to make her afraid even in her own bathroom. Could these have been mental symbols of the middle school boys who stood in the schoolyard staring at her new body? I made sure Sandy had time in our session to talk about her increased academic load, about boys, and about the whole challenging social scene of middle school. But disabling an out of control checker usually takes more than discovering the underlying reason for the fear, and sometimes may not even require that we do so. Years ago, when little was known about the neural circuitry involved, therapists would devote a great deal of time to getting to the bottom of the symptoms. As a result, they sometimes found themselves chasing one object of fear after another in patients with OCD. The one fear faded only to be replaced by another. Working directly with circuitry beneath the fear offers a direct route alleviating it. The overactive circuits of OCD involve the same areas of our middle prefrontal cortex that alert us when we have a mistake in ordinary circumstances, such as my experience with Pablo's antibiotic. Prefrontal area activates the nearby anterior cingulate cortex to create a sense of anxiety. As I discussed in chapter 7, the SEC connects emotion and bodily functions, so the anxiety affects our heart and intestines, giving us an internal sense of dread, which in turn motivates us to find the mistake and correct it. In OCD, another area deeper in the brain called the caudate nucleus is also highly active. The caudate helps us shift gears so that we can change the direction of our thoughts or course of actions, which is essential to fixing mistake. But if this prefrontal caudate link gets stuck in the on position, it can create a loop of never-ending worry and agitation. Strep infections are believed to trigger OCD because they irritate the caudate. This out-of-control circuit, in turn, can activate the deep alarm system of the brainstem. The brainstem survival reflexes, coupled with emotion of fear, feedback to the cortical areas, motivating us to search for danger, whether or not it is truly there. In effect, we were reverse engineering Sandy's fear. Some alarms stir in the brainstem and then it picked up and amplified by the fear generating amygdala. The signal goes to the cortex. Something is wrong, something is dangerous, do something. Now the cortex gets involved and narrows the focus onto a specific item. Desks, corner, sharks, anything that can give the internal fear state a reason to exist or that can rationalize why we feel fear in the first place. Next, the cortex concocts internal behaviors, obsessive thoughts, or external behaviors, compulsive rituals to prevent the imagined threat from harming us. An integrative mindsight approach recognizes that the checker is trying to keep us safe, to give us some sense of control or certainty in an uncertain world. And that's it for today, I guess. Like it's I have almost read it for 2 hours, and it was very nice. Today, like as usually you see, whenever I end the live streaming, at the time I say something at least for 2 to 3 or 5 minutes, and then after that I end the stream. But today I am not having anything. Why I'm saying, I always say that don't have to say any negative words or negative things. I just remind myself to say these, always be in positive. So today we'll finish early by saying nothing. It's also negative. Now we are going to end this live streaming, and if I feel something to say in my mind, then I'm going to share with you in other videos, or tomorrow, or the next video that I'm going to have on this channel. So thank you for watching this live streaming or reading challenge, and I will be continuing reading challenge for 91 days. After that we'll think something different so that we can improve, but let's see how much we can improve ourselves with this live streaming as well as editing skill. uh, and please do let me know about what you would like to have in our channel, or what we would like to have, the things that will improve us. Give some suggestions, give some feedback so that we can improve together, and we'll have some examples for others who are thinking to grow but they are stuck somewhere else just because of the things are not good or the things are not working for them. So give some feedbacks and let's see how we can implement in us. That's it for today. It was nice conversation, nice reading, and yeah, it was good. And that's it for today. What I'm saying, sometimes it's very okay. I don't have to make any sentence. I'll make the correct sentence always. I'll try to say something that will make you feel, yeah, it's the thing. So that's it for today. Thank you very much, and see you in a next video. I'm going to end this live streaming now. Bye bye.